This is Christopher Hitchens, author of God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. Welcome back to the show, Christopher.
Hey, very nice to be back, and congratulations.
Just a young kid with a dream, Christopher.
Yes.
By the way, the picture of you in the getting the spa treatments with the cigarette hanging out of your mouth, one of the great photos I've seen in the last few years. Very
it's one
funny.
of the great unclear on the concept pictures, I think, isn't it?
It's like Bill Hurt in Body Heat when he would do his jog on the beach, and at the end of the jog he would invariably light a smoke up as soon as he was finished. Let's talk Larry Craig here for a second. I read recently who is the gentleman Laud Humphreys, and explain his thesis and explain to me who he is.
He's no longer with us, but he was in the late 60s a retired Episcopalian minister.
Mm-hmm.
Who taught, I think, well, he's doing a doctoral thesis at the University of St. Louis. And he decided, it turned out later that he was himself a closeted homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
But, and there was a great scandal when he published the findings, which he wanted to know what kind of guy goes to the public restroom for action, right? And he did a long survey, and he found that the majority of them are married heterosexuals with respectable jobs and positions in society, tending to overcompensate for their private lives by striking very conservative positions, either religious or political or both. This he called the tactic of the breastplate of righteousness. So it couldn't be a more perfect predictor than from the genial senator.
Is part of the transaction in Laud Humphreys' theses, are the men seeking to be caught and have this demon excised from them? I'm wondering what is the end result?
By the way, I should say that it's uncanny rereading it because it's called Tea Room Trade. If anyone wants to look it up, Tea Room Trade was the name when it was published. Mm-hmm. All the stuff about the hand signals, the foot tapping, all of this kind of thing is in there to some degree of detail. Well, no, I speculate with what I've written about it that some of these people like the danger because in the 60s. Men had, basically, if they wanted a rough male caress, they needed to go probably to a public restroom or somewhere like that. Well, now it's incredibly legal to do any of this, and you can book it on the internet, but they still do it. And I think that there must be a thrill of danger involved, and yes, a repressed desire in some cases to get caught.
Yeah, that was one of the worst parts of the entire episode is when people would protest in Craig's name that they felt horrible that he had been driven by the society at large to this sort of secretive life, and I was thinking, oh, for God's sakes, don't you see this is the very essence of it? This is the juice. This is what the guy does it for.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's I had a friend, a member of Parliament in Britain, who was a terrific toilet trader, held almost all indoor records for it, and he told me that one of the things was you'd walk into the House of Commons and take your seat, bowing to the Speaker and so on, and nodding to your colleagues, thinking to yourself, if they knew what I'd been doing 5 minutes ago in the men's room on St. James's Park, they wouldn't bloody believe it. Well, the Union Station episode, I've been to that men's room as it happened, in Washington, would have given the senator just about nice time to polish something off there and get to the Senate floor in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
No doubt thinking, I've really got away with it today.
Right. That's almost the post-coital cigarette is going back into your real life and taking the pause that refreshes to realize what a clever boy you were.
Has to be. I mean, obviously, I dare say in Idaho, it's not so easy to lead an openly gay life.
No.
Don't know, but it has the reputation of a place that isn't particularly relaxed in that way. But no, it's nothing to do with society.
And you know, when I really turned on Craig, and the first day I kind of dodged it, I didn't like him trundling his wife out. What's your take when they bring the wife out to deflect some of this?
Well, I've recommended in print that this stage of the thing be skipped. It goes from exposure to wife standing by you and denial.
Yes.
To, well, actually, Craig hasn't been typical, because he looks as if he might now want to try and fight back, but he got as far as then the stage of saying, okay, I quit. And I was wondering if it would be therapy, or counseling, or prayer. You know, one of this, that's how it goes.
Yes.
I think we should skip the spousal stage now.
Yeah, me too, because the poor woman standing there in those arc welder sunglasses. I mean, she actually, the glasses weren't enough for her to look at her husband approvingly now. She actually has to whip one of those shoe boxes out with a hole cut into it that you witness an eclipse through. That's how difficult she had to look at her husband. She had to avert his gaze completely.
Yes.
The Craig episode, interesting, but I want to get back to the real world issues here. The column yesterday, Chris, you always have an insight that I don't see. I think if I played you in chess, I'd always be a move behind. You wrote that the U.S. was right to dissolve the Iraqi army. Explain, please.
Oh, yeah. Well, the great vice of American foreign policy up till really quite recently, all during the Cold War, was tendency to rely on proxy military dictatorships. Mm-hmm. To govern countries, so to speak, for us. Indonesia was a famous case. Chile, very well known. Greece, Argentina. Horrific, in bed with military sadists and men with dark glasses and steel helmets. Well, it was very right, I think, to break with that in Iraq and to say, no, we mean it when we say regime change. We mean to say the liberation of Iraq. Iraq doesn't need an army. The army that it has only ever been used for two purposes. One, to occupy and invade neighboring countries, Kuwait and Iran most notably. Two, as a fantastically cruel internal police force of repression. And three, as a huge, huge consumer of the national budget. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but it repeated within its structure the sectarian domination pattern of the country. In other words, a minority of the minority, the Sunni tribe around Saddam Hussein. Mm-hmm. Forcibly conscripting Shia and Kurds to kill their own people and to invade neighbors. Away with it. Start again. And otherwise, we could be facing at any moment in Iraq a military coup.
Right.
Now that can't happen. General Petraeus has a fairly good idea who the senior officers are. And they're under his influence, not he under theirs. And that's the right way, that's the way it should have been from the start. I think it was probably a mistake for Bremer to dissolve the army overnight.
Right.
And because, among other things, a huge number of people are suddenly without a paycheck. I think that was foolish, but I think the principle was a very good one.
My feeling is that Bremer, historically speaking, the Bremers lead you to the Petraeuses. I do feel that these last 4 years have obviously been maddening and heartbreaking, but I think when you watch the inevitable ramp-up of history, I don't think you get to resolution without errors, right?
Well, it's a sad fact that sometimes you have to hit rock bottom.
Right.
Well, I mean, the thing is, what I wonder is whether this will be true also of Iraqi society, which is currently being destroyed by the parties of God, even worse than Yugoslavia was or Lebanon was. Mm-hmm. But in both those cases, people eventually came to their senses, and it was usually, I'm sorry to say, at about the point where there was practically nothing left worth fighting for.
Right.
Now, it would be horrible to think that they'd have to go through all that and get back to the Somalia or Afghanistan stage, because Iraq, before the sanctions and before Saddam, was really quite a developed society.
But you're right. Sometimes you have to go face. As in life, as in political life too, you have to go face down in the gutter. Now, listen. How was the book tour for God Is Not Great? Were you hectored, or how did you find you were received out in the hinterland?
With very, very, very few exceptions, everyone was incredibly polite, and I decided to do the tour mainly in the South and in the Bible Belt, and at every stop to invite someone in holy orders to come out and debate me, which almost everywhere they did. And large crowds came, and the interesting thing for me was to find how many of those showing up had thought till they got there that they were the only atheists in town. Mm-hmm. There are many, many, many more non-believers or unbelievers than the media lets on. The best research we now have is there are 20 million people in the United States who say they've got no religious affiliation. Mm-hmm. That's not 20 million atheists. The atheists are still a very small percentage. But the number of people who are skeptical about religion is high. And among the people who go to church, I think the number who are absolutely devout, shout and holler types is smaller than the figures would suggest, too.
Well, listen, Christopher, you're my... you and Mark Stein, my favorite authors, and but I have to quote the great Mickey Dolenz vis-a-vis God. I'm a believer, but I still enjoy talking to you.
You told me once you were an altar boy in Pittsburgh.
Yes, I was, and even that didn't discourage me. Those horrific times.
You should be nostalgic for that. No, Pittsburgh is a great town. I used to teach there. I wouldn't have a word said against it.
It is a good town with heartfelt proletariat people of good stuff. Now listen, Christopher, we will talk down the road, my friend. How's your life? You good?
Very nice, thank you. And it's still on the bestseller list, and I hope everyone rushes out and buys it.